I have with me today Miss Dawn Matherly, Dawn of Hope Counseling. Miss Dawn, welcome.
Thank you.
So, people really oftentimes don't have a true understanding of what a counselor is, what a counselor does, and why they might need a counselor. So, the things that people need to be aware of, if you had an opportunity to be able to convey, what does that look like? And is it just a good friend? Is it somebody with advice? Is it a guidance counselor? A life coach is very popular these days. But what would you allow someone to what would you reveal to them as to the true benefit of having someone who is a truly professional counselor who's looking after them?
Well, to be honest, we were kind of all of those things in a way. Our job is to be non-judgmental, to be a place where you can come talk about whatever's going on. And I think it really depends on the individual. Our friends and family aren't always equipped to help us with the things that we have going on in our lives. And there reaches a point when you have the same thing happening repetitively, where you're kind of not wanting to go to friends and family anymore, and they're not really wanting to hear it anymore. So it's a place where anybody, whether you have trauma, whether you have stress or job things going on or family problems or whatever, I always feel like it's a good idea for everybody to have a counselor. I have a counselor. We are specifically trained in ways of coping with life in general. It's not so much our job to give advice, but to help you figure out where your life goals are and where you want to be and how you want that to look. My goals for your life are completely inconsequential. I'm not the expert on your life. I just have expertise in areas to help you get where you want to be.
So oftentimes it's pointed to by many people who are successful, and as you look back at their life, and there was usually something that in their mind they thought wasn't possible, some roadblock, some issue, some hang-up, something that was not allowing them to move forward, whatever that might be. And the confidence it takes to be able to get past that and to get beyond that for whatever that is. It isn't usually just one thing. It could be multiple things that it unlocks or unleashes. And success isn't guaranteed to anybody. So there's a little bit of work involved. So the opportunity to be able to be that encourager, but at the same time to keep them from perpetuating things that are not helpful and not going to move forward in getting through with life.
Right. And I often tell people that it's the tape that we play in our head that affects what we do in reality. Your brain only knows what you tell it. And so if you're telling yourself that you're unable to do things or you don't know or you're not good enough, then that's what you believe to be true. And so a lot of times it is about just changing the tape that plays.
Wow, well said. So is there a range of age that you counsel or a particular specificity in a particular subject matter that you tend to specialize in?
So I typically work with adolescents and up. I've worked with children as young as 3. I'm not equipped to really do that here. And it's not my specialty. Like as I've grown as a therapist, my specialties and the things that I do better have changed. And so I do a lot of work with trauma and I guess law enforcement or PTSD, not just related to combat veterans and different things like that, but that is a very special population. I grew up in a military family. So for me, working with our first responders and working with our military is really important to me. But just anybody with any kind of trauma, I am specially trained in something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Relatively new in the case of theories, considering that Freud started this like 100 and some odd years ago. EMDR has been around since the early 80s when it really began to be experimented and kind of fleshed out. But I do a lot of talk therapy. I'm very reality theory based, so a lot of kind of everything in life is a choice. What are you going to choose to do with it? And so, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, teenagers, I love my teenagers. And a lot of times they come in, now it's hard to be a teen. There's
Sure.
just so much that's happening, and
Sure.
social media. And, when I was a kid, you went to school, people picked on you, you went home, it stopped, like they couldn't reach you. And now there's this global reach where you can reach people that you've never even seen or met. So these kids are going through a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot more pressure for them to know what they're doing with their life from 12 and 13 years old. Whereas when I was growing up, it was kind of like, you're a kid, be a kid, do whatever. You'll figure it out. You can figure it out once you get to college. Well, now they want you to know before you get there. And that's really hard on them too. It puts a lot of pressure on them.
So that brings us to a place where, obviously, if you have a passion for this, you have a love for this, what got you into this?
To be honest, I had a rough childhood. Things were not always easy. I grew up in a military family. I was forever the new kid, and things just weren't great all the way around. There was some trauma that happened when I was younger. And the truth of the matter is, when I was 13, I attempted suicide and I was hospitalized. And so I got a therapist that I was working with just before this, and then afterwards as well. And while I was in the hospital, they allowed her to continue to come in and be my therapist while I was there, which was something that was a little unusual, because usually they have therapists at the hospital and you use their therapist or not at all. But she was allowed to continue to be my therapist and come to the hospital and work with me there. And because of her name was Jane. So because of Jane, I really decided at 14 that this was what I wanted to do. And it was a long road getting here. I didn't start college until I was 25 and, all kinds of things like that. But ultimately it was what I wanted to do. And I knew that that was what I wanted to do from pretty early on, because I wouldn't even be here if it hadn't been for her. So
she made a real impact on you as not just a professional, but as someone who you probably saw that actually cared.
yes,
Someone who really appreciated and looked for your best interest.
absolutely.
And so that there was a turning point where probably you didn't necessarily start off saying, I think I know I need a therapist, into you go kicking and screaming in some cases into the therapy session. But then after a little while, you realize this person really has my best interest at heart. And at what point was that revelation to you really made evident enough to where you said, I love this so much, I want to help others and be like this?
I really don't know exactly where it happened. I just remember that there were lots of little things, and I would go to therapy and she would be genuinely interested, or she would remember something that I had said before and bring that up, or remembered something that I liked and she would bring my favorite snacks to therapy.
Love
and
it.
things like that. So it was really this thing that this person is really invested in me and is really here for me and believes in me. And at some point it just all shifted from, I don't even know why I'm here, this is ridiculous, you can't fix any of this, to a place where it's completely life-changing. And I realized that she had been so instrumental in helping me to get to a place where I valued me, that I wanted to be able to do that for other kids. And initially I wanted to work with children and families, and my degree is actually in marriage and family therapy. So I do some couples and family and things like that. But ultimately it's my teenagers and my trauma survivors that are just really my heart.
So over the years, obviously you've had a tremendous amount of influence on other people. Are there any, without naming names, success stories or things that you've really seen some massive change, and, whether through their own willingness to take the counsel and move forward with it, or things happen in their life to be able to, it's not just any one thing, but you contribute to the willingness to accept change, or the willingness to believe in yourself, and the willingness to desire something better for yourself than the state that you happen to be in. Are there any of those relationships that you would have thought back upon and said, I'm glad that God put me right there?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many. And I've worked in addiction for a long time too, which is something that I love to do. You see a lot of progress from when people are coming in and they're like completely at their lowest possible point to they've gotten their own place and they're working and they're getting their kids back, and because a lot of times they've been removed from their custody and
Well,
all of those kinds of things. And there's been times too where people have come in and they're in the process of a divorce and have been the lowest that they've ever been, and to see them progress and get to a place where they're loving themselves again and they're able to, I don't necessarily know that you move on from massive grief, but I
sure.
think you get through it. And
Hmm.
sometimes there's a point where you don't feel like you would without the benefit of someone else being there for you. And so just being a part of people's journey. And I thank a lot of my clients pretty regularly for, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey, because it's really a blessing to me. And it's important. I think it's important for people to know that, you've included me in your life and you've chosen to be here and you've made the decision that you wanted to do something different. And that's something to be commended. And the fact that you are here with me, like
Mm.
that's a blessing to me, that you trust me enough and think enough of me that you're going to include me in that. But there's so many over the years that I've just seen, and especially when working with kids and teenagers, and then you see them again later as adults,
Mm.
or
Powerful.
confidentiality. I can't come up to them out in public or anything like that, but they'll come to me sometimes like, do you remember me? And I always do. I may not remember names, but I would definitely remember faces. And they'll start talking and I'll remember exactly where we were. And it's to see them going from failing in school and having no friends and all of these things that they're going through, being picked on, being bullied, having a hard time with depression, not even sure that they want to still be here,
Right.
to they're in college or have graduated college and they've got these careers and they're in sororities and they're doing all the things. And it's like, oh my goodness, I know that that's not because of me, but the
Sure.
fact that I was allowed to play a part in that means the world to me.
Absolutely. So it's interesting, as a two-war combat veteran, I struggled with PTSD, and I didn't realize that I struggled with PTSD. And I was continuing to move through my professional world as a cinematographer and a camera operator, traveling all over the world. And I noticed that later my ability to put up with things or handle things in a manner that would have been more appropriate, let's say, started to change.
Mhm.
And luckily, one of my Navy SEAL buddies, who was a phenomenal key grip that I worked with on many, many shows, he pulled me aside and said, "You need to get help." And I never saw it in myself, and I never saw that the damage that I was doing to other people. And my expectations, I felt, were utterly appropriate and utterly professional, and this is how it should be, and blah 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 blah. And I didn't realize the impact that I was having on my workplace and my family and others. And had he not said that, I never would have, gotten the counseling that I needed to be able to put me in a much different place, a much more appreciative and healthy place, to be able to move through the rest of my life and not have to live in such a state of situational awareness where there is danger all around me and I
Mhm.
need to be able to take care of myself and all of those that I'm with. It's not That's not the reality that we live in anymore. It was at one time, and I'm no longer there. And that was a powerful, powerful thing. And my counselor did a phenomenal job of helping to articulate that. So the traumas are many, and
Mhm.
they sometimes are old, and they become part of who you think you are. But who you can be is a different person. And so the powerful opportunity that you have to be able to, in essence, guide people out of a difficult and dark situation is really amazing. I'm very honored to hear that you do that kind of work, not just for teens and combat veterans like myself, but also first responders. Most people don't realize the level of difficulty that the life of a police officer or firefighter or first responder in any number of capacities takes on when they, on a relatively annual basis, deal with tremendous tragedy in the lives of others. And it has an impact. So as you talk to them, as you go through some of those things, do you have long clients as opposed to short-term clients? What's the average length of a relationship
Well,
with a client?
I tell my clients from the very first session, my job is to work myself out of a job. Like, ultimately, my job is to get you to a place that you don't need me anymore. And that varies from person to person. I have seen people, especially with using EMDR, where they had something that they had come in for, and we may see each other 8 weeks, 12 weeks. And then I have some clients that I have pretty much been seeing since like the beginning of time. I'm trying to think, like, probably since I started my practice, like, I have some that I don't see them every week. It's always kind of a celebration when we go from weekly to biweekly or, to monthly. And it's always these little steps because I'm not one that's like, okay, well, now you're cured, so you don't need to come back. I'm always kind of, okay, let's stretch this out a little bit and let you cope and use your skills between session and see how you're doing. And let's check back in. And so some of my clients I see literally once every 3 months, once every 6 months, or whenever they decide that they're ready to come back, because that happens a lot too. I'll see somebody for a year, they'll deal with whatever it is that's going on. I might not hear from them for 2 or 3 years, and then something happens and they're like, okay, I could really use some support. And I'm very much a once a client, always a client kind of person. Like, if you called me 4 years later and needed an appointment, I would pull up your chart and we would get it settled. And that's aside from any wait list that I would have or anything like that. I feel like clients that have already been in kind of, those are my chicks, like my babies. And so I feel like it's really important to do that. So it really just depends on the client and what's going on. I've got teenagers that came in with some relatively rough stuff going on, and 3 months later, I'm like, I mean, they're good. We're at a place where I think they're good, and the concerns that you came with initially don't seem to be as big of a problem. They seem to be handling things well. They've learned the coping skills. They're using them outside of session. That's the big thing. Is there's 168 hours in a week. You're with me one. That's a lot of time that you have to do some work on yourself outside of the therapy room. And I think that plays a big part also into like the longevity. And then I have some people that just insist on coming weekly because this is their place where they get to be 100% themselves 100% of the time. They're not bothering their family. They actually get to talk about their family because you can't talk about people to their face. That's not considered socially acceptable in most situations. So it really gives them this outlet, and they just like being able to do that. So that's what we do to give them space to be able to verbalize the things that are going on in their lives.
So how does someone go about referring clients to you? Is it self-referral? Do they feel like they need some help and they reach out to you and schedule an appointment? Or is it parents or coworkers? Or where do you tend to find that outlet that is the place to go? Or how would you recommend those referrals to be? And it's a two-part question. So part one is how do you receive people? And then part two is if you have a family member or somebody in your life that you feel needs help, how does that person go about contacting you to be able to get this individual who probably needs help into your office?
So primarily it's self-referral, or people sometimes find me on the internet. Psychology Today, I'm on that. Word of mouth a lot of times. I have people that, she was my therapist 3 years ago. She's whatever. I keep hearing that recently. And there are a lot of parents that contact me, especially obviously for teenagers, but even for adult children. Sometimes they're like, look, my kid's 25, but, and a lot of times coworkers or family members or whoever, people that are close to them, will suggest, hey, maybe you should reach out to this person or whatever. And normally it's a telephone call. You can email me. Psychology Today has a way to contact me directly as well. So those are usually sent via email. And I respond as quickly as I can. I'm in session a lot of the day, so bear with me. It can take me a little bit to get to everybody, but really it's just so often, much like you were saying with your experience, it's everybody else that notices that there's an issue before we do. And so a lot of times it is, hey, this is going on with my friend. They're sitting right here with me while I call you. Can you talk to them?
Wow.
Or it's just people, like I said, that through their insurance company, through Psychology Today, through searching for counselors in Slidell, it just different things like that.
So you obviously bear a burden for your chicks, for the people that you care enough about to invest in their lives and to see a better outcome for them. So how can we pray for you?
I'm not sure. It's hard. It's a lot of stuff. And anybody that says that they don't bring it home with them is probably lying. I have a therapist. A lot of times will talk about, look, I had this thing go on in therapy. It really brought up a lot of stuff for me, and process through that with them. But ultimately, I think prayers for my sanity and my safety, and me just being aware enough to be able to take care of myself. Because I preach about self-care, what feels like constantly. It's a term that's really in pop culture a lot now, but people often still don't recognize that that's not I go and get my nails done once a week, or like that is self-care, but it's more than that. It's taking time every day to meditate, if that's your thing, to be with the Lord, to be present and show up for yourself.
Wow.
And I struggle a lot with that. I really do, because I'm so present for everybody else that there's times where I'm like, all right, well, now what do I do? Because here it is 9:00 at night, and eating Oreos is not an effective coping skill. It's just not.
Unless the glass is at least beyond half full of whole milk, it's chilled just right.
Okay, that might be a form of
And
self-care.
it's dippable, like your hand's not getting blocked by the rim. You can get at least a few dips out of it before it breaks and falls in.
That's when you have a spoon.
Truly. I really, really appreciate your time. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity to hear some of what you're doing to be able to help and bless not just the people here in Slidell, but I'm sure you've got clients in far-reaching places. And so for the difficulty that you endure to help others and to bless others, I really, really am honored to be able to have some time with you and to hear what it is that you're doing. And I pray that this turns into something that helps other people that become aware to be able to say, yeah, you know what, I need to reach out to her and to schedule a session or two and see what that looks like. So the elements that you would even suggest, and this is kind of a little tiny aside, so imagine speaking to parents or
Mhm.
speaking to those friends or coworkers that might have someone in their life that it's obvious, and there's not necessarily the they're not a willing participant. But how would you suggest to folks that are dealing with someone that might have issues to handle that? Again, back to in a safe manner. How should they approach that conversation? Not so much that we just have to get you over here and then everything's going to be fine, but you might be dealing with someone who's not interested in going to counseling, and how would you suggest to them to handle that from a standpoint of their ability to communicate effectively, or setting boundaries, as it were, or something that just says, "Hey, this is unacceptable," in a way that they're not going to be taken advantage of or abused or hurt in that environment when someone else is really the problem.
Well, there's a couple of things. So you can have a conversation with them. Hey, I've noticed these things are going on. I don't know if you've noticed that. Is there something happening that you want to talk about? And then gently suggesting, I'm not really equipped to help with these things. There's certain things that I can help with, certainly, but, let's get together and talk to somebody. Sometimes it's bringing them with you where there's less of a focus on them, it feels like. Because of my background in marriage and family counseling, I really come from a very systemic viewpoint where I feel like we're all part of a system. We're part of a solar system. We're part of a greater system. Our families are systems. And it's kind of like the gears on the inside of a clock. As long as all of the teeth are there, the clock functions. If one gear loses a tooth, the clock functions differently.
Wow.
Or not at all.
Great example.
So when you're dealing with people that are struggling with whatever it is that's going on, and you can't get them to come in, you can come in. Because when you do something differently, by default, because it's a system, they have to move differently, just like the clock would.
Wow. That's a great way to look at it as well. So the effect can still be had on somebody who sees an opportunity and desires a better outcome for the person that if not themselves, then for someone else, and invest in their lives to be able to say, I care about you, I care about us, I care about our future. And I would love, if this could be better. And I'm not equipped to do that. But the willingness, like you said, to be able to recognize that I don't have to battle this over and over and over again. I can, suggest that maybe there's something else going on. Maybe there's something else behind the scenes, a pressure, some belief system that's wrong. There's some desire that's not in reality, to be able to help get them to that place. So that's a great asset as well, to be able to see how can we make this better for everybody.
Well, and keeping in mind, too, boundaries and coping skills are learned behaviors. Most of us did not grow up in homes where someone's saying, look, we really need to set a boundary here.
True.
Just not, like, oh, honey, I am so sorry you were stressed. Let me teach you some coping skills.
Right.
It doesn't happen. And it's more often than not, it doesn't happen. And that's the thing, is a lot of times I do get family members that are like, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to help them help themselves.
Wow.
Okay, well, let's start with how you can help you so that there's some separation between your emotional state and theirs. Because you don't have to be in a bad mood because somebody else is.
Right.
Like, you're independent and autonomous from them. And I think that for a lot of people, that's the thing, is we take on so much of our loved ones because we love them, that we fail to realize that by changing our behavior, it can change theirs. And that we continue to perpetuate this cycle of them coming home, they kick the dog runs away, the dog comes back. It's this whole cycle that just keeps on every day, where if the dog doesn't run up to the door, the dog doesn't get kicked. So you find ways of changing your situation and your position so that they begin to see their own behavior, or they just begin to organically change their behavior, because if you're not available to be whatever it is that's uncomfortable for you, they have to change what they're doing.
Right. So when you run into other people and the conversation goes around to, what do you do, or this and the other, how does that conversation look like for you? What is your usual response to so what do you do?
That's hard to say. Sometimes I tell people I make people cry for a living. I make people cry for a living. It depends really on the situation, because a lot of times it really is one of those things where they're not looking for a serious answer, or they're not all that interested anyway. But I do tell people, I'm a licensed professional counselor. Been doing this for a while. Absolutely love what I do. And I just work with people to help them create new beginnings for themselves.
Well, the joke that police officers often tell is, whenever you're around, other people and they go, oh, so what do you do? And you go, I'm a firefighter.
It's kind of what I say.
Like, nobody has a problem with firefighters.
Yep. Nope.
But suddenly the air changes when you tell them you're a police officer.
Oh, and it happens with therapists too. And so there are times where I'm like, okay, is this a situation in which I actually want to open that up?
Right.
Because people naturally, as long as I can remember, even as a teenager, my friends all came to me when they had stuff going on, which I think probably helped push me in this direction too. I mean, I was kind of naturally gravitating towards that kind of connection with people. And it's great, but in certain situations, it's not necessarily appropriate for us to open up a whole can of worms standing at an event somewhere.
Right.
And again, it's about boundaries. So a lot of times I do have to this is kind of what I do. But really and truly, I feel like what I do is help people create the life for themselves that they want and that they need to have for themselves and family, loved ones, whomever, and just help them down their road.
So didn't I see you in a Mardi Gras parade recently?
You did. I am part of Bad Moms That March. This is our first year marching. Absolutely love it. That is one of my self-care things that I do. I'm not the best dancer in the world, but I love it. And it's been so much fun. We're actually going to be in Saline on Friday. And we've been invited to perform at an event at the Chafuncta Brewery on Saturday.
Love it. So how many bad moms are there out there?
Right now, we have 60 in the crew itself, and our waiting list has jumped to over 200 since Mardi Gras season started. So we're going to have to revamp our interview process, I think.
Love it. Love it. Such a blessing to be here with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you having me here. It's been fun.
Well, I look forward to the next opportunity.
Absolutely.
Because I think that what I'd love to see is for you to be sitting here having an opportunity to interview and talk to other people that are in your community or in your world, to be able to give them a chance to be able to hear some of the amazing things that God's doing in their life as well.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Next up, stay tuned.